On a Saturday night, how about that? Appreciate you stopping by here at the Voice of College Football. I vowed that I'm going to go through every season in the history of college football, and we are going to rewrite the record books, and we are going to rightly adjust the national championship tote board. Welcome in. Leave those comments and questions there in the chat. If you would like to call, I've left that line in the chat as well. Just keep in mind, one rule on these live streams is that you call about the season we are currently talking about. So check out the previous live stream, the college football playoff era 2014 through 24. We couldn't have possibly made any changes, adjustments, addendums to the college football playoff system. Could we have possibly questioned any of those championship results? Is it possible? Well, check out the live stream from the other night. So showing up, surprise, surprise, surprise on a Saturday night. I have vowed it once again, regardless of how many people join me, I am going to sit here. I may sit in front of no one, and I am going to go through every season in the history of college football because that's what I do. If you watch me for no other reason, watch me because I have a passion for college football. Yeah. I'm not going to try to sell it. Let's go. Here we go. Let's go through 2013. And hopefully tonight we will get back through the rest of the BCS era, which started in 1998. Again, comments and questions are welcome. And the call-in line is there, ready to roll. Before we get started, we will remind you that the Big Ten Live Show is back in 2 weeks. Corey, Brad, and myself on Tuesdays at 6 p.m. Eastern Time, the week of Big Ten Media Days. Corey, Brad, and myself live with you each and every Tuesday, taking your calls, tremendous guests, the best Big Ten Live Show that you will see anywhere. Corey and myself, Tuesdays at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. Also, the College Football Show comes your way. The College Football Show, Mondays through Fridays at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. Okay. Let's get to it. Starting with 2013. And we are going to have some issues with 2013. And you may think, well, Florida State was undefeated. What are you going to do about that? Nothing, right? Not about Florida State. So in this 2013 season, to refresh your memory, Florida State marched through the season with Jameis Winston at quarterback, dominated the ACC, rolled past Oregon. I'm sorry, I'm going through the 2014 season. Oregon rolled them in 2014. Florida State, of course, won the ACC championship game over Duke. They faced off against Auburn, who had won the SEC with a win in the championship game in Atlanta over Missouri in just their second season in the SEC. So I don't know that a lot of people have issues with this. I don't know that a lot of people, I don't remember having issues with it at that time. That Auburn was the SEC champion. They had one loss, so why not? They would be in the championship game, of course. Okay, so look at the Week 15 standings. Those are the AP rankings. Florida State number 1, and this is following championship weekend. Auburn, of course, had defeated Alabama in the famed Kick Six game. So Alabama may be the best team in the country that year, sitting at home, as they should, 11-1. What about this Michigan State situation? Michigan State at 12-1. They won the Big Ten. They defeated a 12-0 Ohio State team in the Big Ten championship game by 10. Michigan State's one loss was to Notre Dame. If you watched that game, as I did, and do recall, it was quite tainted. It was quite tainted. Michigan State lost, I believe, 20-17. We'll look at these teams' seasons here in just a second. So the Michigan State lost to Notre Dame by 1 score. Auburn lost to LSU by 2 touchdowns, and that 2013 LSU team was decent. There you see them, number 14 in the country. And we'll have to check out Baylor. Now, Ohio State, not a factor despite a 12-1 record because they lost the Big Ten championship game. And everyone else, not a factor because they've got 2 losses. So we need to check on Michigan State And I'm curious about Baylor. I've done this before, but it's been a few years, and I don't recall who Baylor lost to that year. Now, of course, Baylor lost their bowl appearance in the Fiesta Bowl to UCF by 10 points. So that would have eliminated them if you're looking at the overall results of the season. But if you're just looking at championship weekend and who should have been selected for the BCS championship game, I'm not saying that Auburn should not have been selected. I'm just saying that Michigan State earned it just as much as Auburn did. So here is 2013 Michigan State. I think the loss to Notre Dame was 20-17. 17-13. They have changed these settings, and it's driving me crazy. Okay. So Michigan State, that's the resume right there. Lost at Notre Dame. And then beat a decent Iowa team. There you see a lack of ranked wins. They did beat Michigan, who was 21 at the time. Michigan finished just 7-6 that year. Won that game by 23 points. So in the regular season, they ended up not playing any ranked teams or defeating any ranked teams that I believe finished ranked. We will have to check on the Big Ten standings. But that's not my concern. It's that they beat number 2 Ohio State by 10 points in the Big Ten championship to finish 12-1. So all I'm saying here is that Auburn played a tougher schedule. They played in a better conference. They had the same record. I have no issue with Auburn going to the BCS championship game because there was only one spot opposite Florida State. But in a playoff era, you got a seat for Michigan State and you've got a seat for somebody else. Probably would have been Alabama 11-1. You probably would have had a playoff of Florida State against Michigan State, Auburn, Alabama in a rematch. So just a footnote to 2013 is that Michigan State kind of got ripped off. Again, Auburn, better resume against better opponents, but Michigan State accomplished the same thing that Auburn did. They went 12-1. They won the conference. And they beat one of the 3 or 4 best teams in the country in the conference championship game. I'm curious about Baylor. I don't remember who they lost to, but we're going to eliminate Baylor automatically because they did not play a Big 12 championship game. So they were 11-1 instead of 12-1. There's Baylor's loss. They got scalped by Oklahoma State by 32. And Oklahoma State finished in the top 10 or 15 in the country. So Baylor, a non-factor because they did not play a conference championship game. And true to form, they played no one outside the conference. Wofford, Buffalo, and Louisiana Monroe. So footnote to 2013 is that Michigan State did not get an opportunity to play for the national championship. If you have any comments about any of these seasons, obviously leave those in the chat, but we've also left the call-in line. If you would like to kick in with that one, we have left the call-in line. But other than that, I'm good with no calls. I can just march on through this. But if you do have a comment or question about any of these seasons, please be calling about the season that we are discussing. Thank you, John, for being here, Texas Dog, and others. Now we go to 2012. 2012 seems rather simple as well, but it's not. Not if you really look at it. 2012. So what we've got for 2012 is Alabama throttling Notre Dame in the BCS championship game, of course. What a disaster that was. 28-0 at half. 42-14 final was not that close. Alabama, I would never argue with anyone, was the best team in college football that year. But we are not here to argue the best team in the country. We are here to argue were teams ripped off either an opportunity to win a national championship or, as we go pre-BCS, just the vote for the national championship. Okay. So Alabama lost that game to Texas A&M. They recovered. They won the SEC. They beat Missouri. Wait a minute, 2012. Not Missouri. They beat Georgia. Oh, yeah. Georgia in that epic SEC championship game. The two best teams in the country, in my opinion, were Alabama and Georgia. They were the two best teams in the country. Ohio State should have been afforded an opportunity to play in the national championship game. Of course, we had the stupid tattoo, just an utter crap, stupid rule. And yes, I won't go into that. But they're going to be noted that Ohio State did not receive an opportunity to play for the national championship. So we all know, had Ohio State been eligible, they would have had to have played in a Big Ten championship game. So we don't know the outcome of that. They could have lost. They would have played Nebraska. Well, let me correct that. Minnie's in the chat. There's no way Ohio State's going to lose to Nebraska in a Big Ten championship game. So that's a gimme. And so Alabama's rightly in the BCS championship game, and Notre Dame is as well. And this is a Notre Dame team that obviously did not have to play a conference championship game either. So that kind of affords me the argument. That is giving me, in a sense, an outlet to argue the Ohio State point, because although they did not play in a conference championship game, they were undefeated, just like Notre Dame, undefeated without playing in a conference championship game. Again, I believe Alabama and Georgia were the two best teams in college football, but that's not our practice here. So keep in mind, what's really intriguing here that rarely gets brought up, I've never heard this brought up by anyone but myself, would be, what about Oregon? The thing is, it seems rather simple to say maybe Oregon should have played in the national championship game because they actually won a conference and Notre Dame did not. So look at not the final results on January 9th. Look at the week 14 results where Notre Dame was number 1, Bama 2, Ohio State 3, and on down the line. That Florida team, they get forgotten, but I got to tell you, that Florida team, they played probably the toughest schedule in college football. Their one loss was to Georgia, and that cost them a championship game appearance against Bama. I don't think that they would have won that game. But Florida is very intriguing because they really get lost in this year where, man, if there was a playoff system, even of 4 teams, Florida would have had a definite argument. So let's sort this out. Notre Dame, they won all the games. The Stanford game was a nail biter. The Pitt game was a nail biter. They had some other nail biters, Michigan, and they somehow made it through. They were 12-0. Okay, fine. Bama lost to Texas A&M. Again, Ohio State, technically on probation, did not play in the Big Ten championship game, which they would have had to deal with Nebraska. But it's the Oregon. Guess who the other team that factors into this? It's actually Stanford, because even though they're 11-2, the reason there's not an argument for Oregon, the reason that you don't hear much about this, you don't hear, well, why did Oregon not play? Because they had the same record as Bama, and they're 1-2 in the country at one point, or 2-3 in the country. They're in that range. Well, it's because Oregon lost the wrong game. This has happened a number of times. Oregon lost to Stanford. and Stanford lost the non-conference game. We'll look it up here in just a second. So Stanford lost, of course, the non-conference game to Notre Dame. So Stanford and Oregon tied for the Pac-12 championship. But Stanford won the head-to-head, but they had a worse record because they lost the out-of-conference game to Notre Dame. And that game was a nail-biter. So this is what gets very convoluted here, is that Bama rightly gets the choice here. They rightly get the selection. Now, they didn't get it because it was the right thing to do. They got it because they were Bama, and they were the best team, and by the eyeball test, we're the best team. But the thing is that everybody else kind of eliminated themselves, even though they had the same record, virtually the same record as Bama. Everybody else eliminated themselves by logistics. Ohio State was on probation, couldn't play in the Big Ten championship game. Florida lost the wrong game. They lost to Georgia, so they could not advance to the SEC championship game. Oregon was 11-1, but they lost the wrong game. They lost to Stanford, so they could not advance to the Pac-12 championship game. Then you got Kansas State, who was 11-1, and they won the Big 12. However, there was no Big 12 championship game. So I am going to note all of those teams with frail but still somewhat legitimate arguments, especially I think all of them have some type of an argument. But Alabama has the 12th win and the SEC championship. Nobody else has that 12th win and a conference championship. Ohio State's got the 12th win, but they don't have the conference championship. Florida, Oregon, Stanford, Kansas State, they've got 11 wins, and Stanford's got a conference championship, but they all lost the wrong game. So we had the right BCS championship game, Bama, Notre Dame, but I think a lot of people forget how convoluted this season was, or how many other teams had an angle at this. Again, starting with Ohio State, but also Oregon, also Kansas State as conference champion. I was going to include Oregon there, but they did not win the conference championship. Jackson has left the link there in the chat, but just keep in mind, please call me with questions, comments about the particular season that we're discussing right now. So I'm going to have a lot of footnotes of this season as we reset the national championships each year. I'm not changing anything for 2012, but I will notate the Ohio State argument and just the odd scenario that befalls Oregon and Florida and Kansas State and even, of course, Georgia. If you're new to college football, if you want to see an epic ending between two loaded football teams, the 2012 SEC championship game, Georgia marches down the field. They're at the 4-yard line. They unfortunately have a tipped pass in which the tight end or the fullback in the flat should not have caught the football, but he did what his instincts took over, and he caught the football and time ran out. Otherwise, Georgia would have had one more play. They needed one more play or one more second to have a shot. So that's the deal for 2012. It's a rightful national championship, but you've got the Ohio State, the Florida, the Oregon, the Stanford, and the K-State arguments. And then if you assess the entire season, of course, Kansas State got blown out by Oregon in the Fiesta Bowl, so forget them. Florida lost to Louisville in the Sugar Bowl, and so that was the end of them as well. Let's move back to 2011. This is a fun one. What happened here in 2011, most of you remember, is that we had two SEC teams playing in the BCS championship game, of course. Earlier in the season, LSU went to Tuscaloosa and beat Bama in the game of the century, 9-6 in overtime. So that's where we stood in 2011. Of course, LSU won the SEC West because they beat Bama head-to-head. They went on to the SEC championship game and won. Bama had one loss. LSU was undefeated. Okay. Oklahoma State, of course, is the team in question. We have Oklahoma State with one loss. And if you recall, there was that tragedy and Oklahoma State, in the midst of the tragedy, went to Iowa State on a Thursday night and were upset by a bad Cyclones team. Oklahoma State went on and won the Big 12 championship. They did not play in the conference championship game because there was none. Stanford's an interesting situation here at 11-1 as well. But I believe we're going to look at Stanford in just a second. I believe that Stanford ran into the same situation a year prior to what they inflicted on Oregon. Let's look at this. The 2011 Stanford team, I believe, lost to Oregon. And so, yes, and they got pummeled 53-30. So this is the Stanford season for 2011. So how ironic is this that in consecutive years, 1 year you've got Stanford 11-1, Oregon 11-2, but since Stanford lost to Oregon, they also lost the conference, and Oregon, despite having 2 losses because they played LSU in the opener, they go on to the Pac-12 championship game, and they're the team in the running. And the exact opposite happened the next year. Oregon was 11-1. Stanford was 11-2. Stanford lost the non-conference game, but Stanford beat Oregon head-to-head, so they won the conference. So the 11-2 team was the conference champion over the 11-1 team. Crazy, crazy stuff. So the beneficiary of all this was Alabama, because if Stanford would have won in 2011 over Oregon, then Stanford would have been playing in the national championship game. If Oregon would have beaten Stanford, think about this. If you take the results between Oregon and Stanford in 2011 and 2012 and you flip them, and you have Stanford win the 2011 game and Oregon win the 2012 game, then those two teams are playing in the national championship game. Stanford in 2011 and Oregon in 2012. Crazy. So our footnote to 2011 is not that Stanford should have played in the national championship game because they did not get to the Pac-12 championship game, although we could say the same thing for Bama. And a lot of people would argue that if you look at the season holistically, and at this point, we're only about 12 or 13 years removed from the poll era, that if you looked at the season holistically, well, Alabama went 12-1, LSU went 13-1, LSU won the SEC championship game, and they split 2 games. So why does LSU not get a share of the national championship? Well, it's because we had a system set up that determined who played in the national championship game, and LSU lost to Alabama. I feel bad for Oklahoma State. I believe that they should have been given the opportunity to play for the national championship. I distinctly remember walking into work on Monday after these results came in. There was no voice of college football. Can you imagine there being a day and age when there was no voice of college football? Shudder the thought. But at this time, remember walking into work and having people ask me, did they get it right? Did the BCS get it right? Should it have been Alabama and LSU? Are they the two best teams? And my response was, well, you're asking two different questions. Are Alabama and LSU the two best teams? Yes, they are the two best teams. Oklahoma State is not beating one of those two teams. I hear all sorts of people say that Oklahoma State had this great offense and they would have won against either one of them. I do not believe that. The two best teams played in the Superdome for the BCS championship. However, Oklahoma State should have been given an opportunity. Alabama had its opportunity, and Oklahoma State was a conference champion. So 2011, you've got the Oklahoma State situation, and you've got the Oregon and Stanford situations. Let's move back to 2010, and we've got a pretty clear-cut season, although there are undefeated teams to at least give some credit and recognition to. We've got in 2010, of course, Auburn and Oregon played for the national championship. Auburn won on last second field goal, 22-19. Auburn is the national champion at 13-0. Cam Newton and company, and they beat South Carolina in the SEC championship game. They came back from 3 touchdowns down to beat Alabama in the Iron Bowl. Oregon, the Pac-12 champion. Now you see in the final poll, TCU, they won a bowl game against Wisconsin, the Rose Bowl game. That was a close one. They won 21-19, I believe, was the final score. TCU winning the Rose Bowl against Wisconsin. So they beat a number 4 team in the country. Now, TCU, obviously, this is pre-Big 12 TCU. This is a TCU team that was playing in the group of 5. So I would in no way argue TCU has any claim to a national championship, except they did not get the opportunity. It would have been a great playoff to see Auburn, Oregon, TCU, and take your pick. Wisconsin 11-1, Stanford 11-1, Ohio State 11-1, who lost to Wisconsin. Michigan State 11-1. They beat Wisconsin. You had a 3-way tie for the Big Ten championship that year, and Wisconsin beat Ohio State, but Michigan State beat Wisconsin. And so if we had a national champion that year with 1 loss, and TCU finished 13-0 and defeated a high-level Power 5 team in its bowl game, then I would give TCU a share of the national championship. But Auburn is the clear-cut national champion in 2010. But TCU is certainly worth noting at 13-0, winning the Rose Bowl. Now, why Oregon? These kind of poll results and votes mystify me. Not that it matters. Not that Oregon cares that they finished number 3 instead of number 2. But if Auburn is the national champion, they're 14-0. And Auburn just beat a 12-0 Oregon team. And so Oregon lost on the last play of the game to Auburn to lose the national championship. Why did they fall to number 3? They played a basically even game. It was 19-19 with 1 second left on the clock. And they fall to number 3. Oregon should have been voted number 2. But no huge deal. So we just note that TCU was undefeated in 2010. Once we get back to 2008 and 2007, good Lord, it gets messy. Back to 2009. Let's go to 2009. And of course, we had two undefeated teams that played in the BCS championship game. Alabama, Texas at the Rose Bowl. Bama won. Colt McCoy got hurt. We know the deal. So Bama rightly wins the national championship. So TCU played Boise State in the Fiesta Bowl, and Boise State won a pretty ugly game. Didn't they win like 22-13 or something like that? And so anyway, Boise State needs to be given some credit here. This would have been a great 4-team. Well, it would have been difficult to set up a 4-team playoff because you had Bama, Texas, TCU, Cincinnati, and Boise State all undefeated. You had 5 undefeated teams. So that would have been a heck of a vote. But based on the AP poll, Boise State would have been left out, and Cincinnati would have been the 4 seed in the playoff. So Bama wins the national championship, but certainly it's worth noting Boise State finished off TCU to finish undefeated. And basically that's all we've got that particular season. Cincinnati ran into Florida and just completely got trucked. Game was 37-3 at halftime. So, of course, they were not up to the challenge. All right. Now we've got our work cut out for us. 2008 is brutal. 2008 is a tough one. All right. 2008. I am surprised that there's not more controversy about this. People are fine. Just Florida beat Oklahoma. They won the national championship. Oklahoma lost to Texas. Texas had the same record in the regular season as Oklahoma. But of course, there was a 3-way tie between Oklahoma, Texas, and Texas Tech that won on the final play of the game on the Michael Crabtree touchdown. So we had a 3-way tie for first place. And even Texas Tech was 11-1. Texas Tech lost to Oklahoma, I believe. Let's check on Texas Tech for 2008. I think they got obliterated by Oklahoma, if I do recall. Yes, 65-21. Yeah, Mike Leach and the boys did not have it that night. And here we've got Texas Tech for 2008. They beat number 1 Texas. That's the Crabtree play. And then Oklahoma State. What a run they had there against Kansas, Texas, Oklahoma State, Oklahoma. And they lost that game to Oklahoma by 44 points. And then they lost the bowl game. But still, forget the bowl game. We're going into the selection of the championship game. And it's really not fair, but there's no good way to slice it. And this is what was wrong with the BCS era, is there is no good way to slice this. For all the people out there that defend the BCS, now, it's one thing to defend the system. The system's not horrible. I'm talking about the defense of selecting 2 teams. Because Florida, Oklahoma, Texas, USC, pre-Pac-12 championship game, Penn State, Utah, Texas Tech, Boise State, 8 teams have an argument to play in the BCS championship game. 8 teams have an argument. I can make an argument for Florida, of course, and Oklahoma. Texas, yes. Alabama, no, because they lost head-to-head to Florida in the SEC championship game. USC, Pac-12 champ. Penn State, Big Ten champ. Utah undefeated. And then backed it up against Alabama in the Sugar Bowl, a team that came within 1 score of playing in the national championship game. Texas Tech 11-1. Even though they got throttled by Oklahoma, you play that merry-go-round deal with Texas Tech, Oklahoma, and Texas. And then there's Boise State at 12-0. So, who is the national champion? Goodness. So, I am notating here that Texas, USC, Penn State, Utah, Texas Tech, Boise State all have claims to play in the national championship game. But then once they went and played bowl games, so Florida beat Oklahoma, so that knocks out Oklahoma. They got their shot, of course. Well, Texas won the Fiesta Bowl to finish 12-1. They actually finished ahead of Oklahoma, as well they should. They won the game head-to-head, and then they finished with a better record. But Oklahoma got the shot to play in the BCS championship game. USC dusted off Penn State. And Utah beat Alabama. If you think at any point in all of this that I'm being a little bit hasty in my decisions, understand that I've gone through this like 10 or 12 previous times. So I've got a lot of this already cooked up in my head about what I decided in the past and why I decided it. And for 2008, this is the first time basically we are going in other directions for national champions. And for 2008, Florida's the national champion. We are not taking that away from them, but we are adding Utah, USC, and Texas. They all win national championships in 2008. Why not? Utah, USC, and Texas are also national champions in 2008. Utah, because even though Group of 5 undefeated, so I give them the 1-game deficit. And then USC dusted off Penn State, an 11-1 Big Ten champion, and finished with the same record virtually as Florida. And Texas did the same thing after beating Ohio State in the Fiesta Bowl. So we've got 4 national champions for 2008. (2007). This is even worse in some ways. This obviously gets pinned as the most chaotic season, but that's because of what happened in the final weeks leading up to the BCS championship game. And then look at Ohio, look at week 11. Ohio State's sitting there after they lost to Illinois. They were number 1, 10-0. They lost to Illinois. And then they beat Michigan. But prior to beating Michigan, they dropped to number 7 with 1 game left in the season. Then they beat Michigan to go to 11-1, number 5 in the country. And they got losses out of Mizzou, West Virginia, Kansas. Got all those teams knocked out of the way. to complete the run to number 1. LSU, of course, beat them, and there we've got our final situation. Look at all these 2-loss teams. It's crazy. So, LSU beat Ohio State. They've got the same record virtually. That knocks out the Buckeyes. Georgia, unfortunately, this particular season did not get a chance to play LSU in the SEC championship game. LSU beat, what was it, Tennessee in the SEC championship game. We should have seen LSU and Georgia in the SEC championship game, but Georgia lost head-to-head to Tennessee. Oh boy, USC lost to Oregon State, and we're going to have to look at their other loss. What happened to USC? 2007 USC. I forget. USC lost to Oregon and Stanford. It was the year before they lost to Oregon State. They lost to Stanford by 1. Yeah, that was the famous 41-point favorite status in which Jim Harbaugh went into the LA Coliseum and beat Stanford and beat USC. USC lost to number 5 Oregon 24-17. Crazy. This is okay. I'm going to make a decision on the national champions for 2007, but I certainly am going to review it, and I am open to anyone when I unveil my final results to bringing anything to light that should be brought to light. You have 4, 5, 6 2-loss teams. Forget BYU. You have 6 2-loss teams, and you have Kansas. You could make the argument that Kansas should be the national champion. Now, Kansas did not make the Big 12 championship game because they lost to Oklahoma, correct? They got slaughtered by Oklahoma, I believe. We'll look this up in just a second. But then Kansas beat, let me get this straight. Somebody annihilated Virginia Tech. I think that was, Kansas slipped by Virginia Tech like 24-21. West Virginia whipped Oklahoma. Those were the bowl results. This is brutal. LSU lost 2 overtime games. They lost to Arkansas and Kentucky. Not exceptional football teams. Arkansas was pretty good. Arkansas finished in the final poll. No, they did not. Arkansas dropped out after a bowl loss. So LSU won the national championship and had 2 losses to unranked teams. Georgia lost 2 games. They lost to Tennessee, and let's look up Georgia. 2007. Georgia. This is the team that killed Hawaii in the Sugar Bowl. 42-10. Oh, they lost to South Carolina by 4. They got whipped by Tennessee by 21. And this is where I'm going to make some tough calls, but we're going to do what's right and just, and people are going to hammer me for this, but we might have like 7 national champions this year. There's Georgia. In 2007. Would have loved to have seen them play LSU. And I know this team, all these years later, and even at the time, people were saying, well, Georgia's the best team in the country. They lost to a decent South Carolina team. They beat Alabama in overtime. They lost to Tennessee by 3 touchdowns. They won all these other games. They beat a really good Florida team. Auburn was decent. Kentucky was decent. And then they just crushed Hawaii. But who cares? Yeah, I'm not as sold on Georgia being so good as Texas Dog is saying that was Mark Richt's best team with Georgia. Really? You think that this team was better than the 2012 team? Yes, Christopher. Georgia lost 2 games. They lost to Tennessee by 3 touchdowns, and they lost to South Carolina by 4. Yes, this is the Georgia team, Matthew, with those studs. Yeah, it was a talented team, and people wanted so badly that Georgia should have played in the SEC championship game against LSU, but Tennessee beat them head-to-head. So both teams were 6-2 in the conference, and Tennessee beat them head-to-head. You know, I can't if you just look at record, who is the national champion? It's Kansas. I'm not saying that Kansas should be the national champion by themselves, but they got 1 vote. LSU got 60. They won the BCS championship game. USC got 1. Georgia got 3. Kansas gets the 1 vote. Oh, my goodness. How did these teams fare against each other? So in my line of thinking, Ohio State lost to LSU. So since they lost to one of the teams involved, they're out. We see that USC lost to Oregon and Stanford. Missouri. So Missouri won the Cotton Bowl against Oklahoma State that year. So they finished at 12-2. I believe the Big 12 championship game was played between Oklahoma and Missouri. I do believe. Yeah, look at week 13. Missouri was 11-1, and they were playing Oklahoma in the Big 12 championship game, and Oklahoma really put it on them. I think that game was like 62-21. We'll look it up here. Of course, West Virginia blew it against Pitt. I don't think that LSU should be awarded a national championship just because they beat Ohio State. Now, I know we got a system in place, and those were the 2 teams that were selected, but we're trying to get past all of that and award based on merit. West Virginia lost to Pitt. And who was their other loss? So everybody makes a big deal about West Virginia lost to Pitt. Pitt was 4-7. West Virginia lost. That knocked them out of the BCS championship game. It did. It would have been Ohio State and West Virginia. Because you see in week 13 going into the final weekend, Missouri was number 1, West Virginia 2, Ohio State 3. So the top 2 lost. Ohio State moved in. And if West Virginia would have won, they would have maintained that number 2 position, probably vaulted to number 1, and Ohio State would have been number 2. But who else did West Virginia lose to? Because I think a lot of people, including myself, without thinking about it and going back and remembering, are thinking that West Virginia was undefeated. And they had this cataclysmic loss to Pitt that knocked them out of the BCS championship game. Well, they lost to South Florida. Okay, I'm not overwhelmed by this West Virginia schedule. Of course, at the time, the Big East was considered to be a power conference. What did we call them back then? BCS conferences. But look at West Virginia's schedule. They lost to South Florida. Who did they beat? Cincinnati and UConn. They lost to Pitt. All right. Man, it's tough to award this team a national championship. If we're going to award like 7 teams a national championship, I guess they're involved. But man, who did they beat that was any good until the bowl game? Wow. This has me stumped, and I knew it would. Yes, Matthew. West Virginia was in line to play the BCS championship game in 07, and they went. I think that game was at home. Yeah, the game was at home. They lost to Pitt 13-9. They would have played in the BCS championship game. Christopher is telling us that South Florida had an especially very good football team that year. Matthew says set up a 12-team bracket. So this will be part of the next book, actually. But yeah, the 12-team bracket would have looked like this. So let's think it through, because it's just not as clear cut as, because we got to think of conference champions. So look at week 14, because that's what we're working off of. Ohio State won the Big Ten. Based on these rankings, they would have been the number 1 seed. LSU won the SEC. They're number 2. Oklahoma won the Big 12. They're number 3. So, well, if we're going by the new format, it makes it easy on us, because we don't have to go through all the championship games and who won the conferences. It's just simply the rankings, the top 12. So the top 12 get in, especially considering that Hawaii, from some knucklehead in week 14, was voting Hawaii number 1 because they were 12-0. That was brilliant. Okay. Yeah. So in the column next to the far right, that's your 12-team playoff, because we got a group of 5 with Hawaii in there. Ohio State, I'm sorry. Ohio State, LSU, Oklahoma, and Georgia get byes. So your 5-12 matchups, Virginia Tech against Arizona State. Who knows? I'm going to have to remember back to 2007 to remember how good these teams were. Arizona State and Virginia Tech, 5-12 matchup. USC, West Virginia, 6-11 matchup. And this is an 07. Man, I think USC was. I think that the 2 best teams in the country were LSU and USC. All right, number 7 is Mizzou. They would have played Hawaii, and then we would have had a Kansas, Florida. Yeah, Tim Tebow won the Heisman that year. Florida 9-3 lost to Michigan in the Capital One Bowl. That's funny. The big controversy that year would have also been Florida at 9-3 gets in, but Illinois, Boston College, Clemson, Texas, Wisconsin, BYU's at 10-2, Cincinnati's 9-3, Virginia's 9-3. Look at all those 9-3 teams that would have been left out. Yeah, LSU and USC are the 2 best teams in the country in 07, from what I remember. I would have put my money on those 2 teams. But this exercise is not about that. Did anybody else lose to anyone else that's part of this equation? LSU lost to Kentucky and Arkansas. Georgia lost to South Carolina and Tennessee. USC lost to Oregon and Stanford. Mizzou lost to Oklahoma. And did we not just look at Mizzou? I guess we did not. They lost to Oklahoma. They just got killed in that game, too. This is a crazy scenario to try. And I don't believe in awarding national championships based on like this much difference in strength of schedule or something like that. Okay. So here's the deal with Mizzou this particular year. They had the unfortunate situation of running into Oklahoma twice. Oh, they beat Arkansas in the Cotton Bowl. I was getting that mixed up with another year where Mizzou beat Oklahoma State, or Oklahoma State beat Mizzou. Anyway, they throttled Arkansas by 31 points. But that's funny. Look at Mizzou. They were 12-0 aside from playing Oklahoma, and they lost by 10 in Norman, and then they lost in the Big 12 championship game by 21 points. So look at that. If you're going to give Missouri a share of the national championship, this is how crazy this is getting. This is how crazy that this scenario gets. That if you're going to give Mizzou a share of the national championship at 12-2, then even though Oklahoma lost 3 games, they beat Mizzou twice, and I am in no way advocating for Missouri or Oklahoma to be the national champion. What is Wet Blanket talking about where he says Oklahoma State beat number 2 Mizzou? What year is that? That is not the year we're talking about. Mizzou's 2 losses are against Oklahoma. They're right on the screen. Yeah, Tim, Tim, if I were rewriting history officially, which of course I am rewriting history, but nobody cares, but I'm doing it for my own self-satisfaction, rewriting college football history, USC is going to benefit from this greatly because they get a share of the national championship in 2008. And they're just about to get a share of the national championship in 2007. And if I remember correctly, in 2006, they only lost 1 game, and Florida lost a game. So they might get a share of the national championship in 2006 as well. Yeah, that Illinois team that played USC, and USC would have beaten anyone in the Big Ten. They would not have throttled them, but they would have won comfortably. And the Illinois was not the best team in the Big Ten. They were not the second best team in the Big Ten. They may not have been the third best team in the Big Ten. All right. Why am I getting all these comments about Oklahoma State defeating Missouri? We're on 2007 here. Mizzou lost twice. They lost to Oklahoma both times. All right. So this is messy, but this is college football. And I get it. People are not going to like this. But all these teams have a right to claim a national championship. All 7 of these. And really, the first team I would eliminate, and I'm such a homer, would be Ohio State because they lost head-to-head to LSU. But none of these other teams lost to each other. They did not play each other. LSU didn't play any of these teams. Georgia didn't play any of these teams. USC did not play any of these teams. Missouri did not play any of these teams. Ohio State played 1. They lost to LSU. West Virginia did not play any of these teams. Kansas did not play any of these teams. Kansas beat Virginia Tech, and West Virginia beat Oklahoma. This is a tough call right here, but we have 7 national champions in 2007. Seven national champions in 2007. All right. There's no logical way around it. Now, we can make all sorts of judgment calls, but I'm not doing that. All right. 2006 seems pretty clear cut. Ohio State was number 1 wire to wire. Then they got throttled by Florida in the BCS championship game. So Florida should obviously just be the only team to win the national championship. Now, I guess I did not realize that USC lost 2 games. Okay, USC lost 2 games in 06. They must have lost to UCLA that year. You got this Louisville team down here, 12-1, but they played in the American Conference or whatever we called it at that point. What were they called? They played in the Big East. I'm sorry. They played in the Big East. Wisconsin. Yeah, there's really no way to. The Wisconsin situation is kind of interesting because Wisconsin only lost 1 game. But since they lost 1 game, they lost to Michigan. So Wisconsin goes on to a bowl game against Arkansas. They win that game. So Wisconsin ended up beating the team that Florida beat in the SEC championship game by roughly the same score, same margin. But man, we cannot award Wisconsin a national championship because they lost to Michigan handily that season. Florida's loss was to Ole Miss, who was not a great football team. I do think they finished ranked. I guess not. I thought they finished ranked. This was the Tim. No. This was not the Tim Tebow speech year. That was in 08, of course. Florida lost to LSU, I do believe, and that LSU team finished number 3. Yeah, I really can't pry the national championship away from Florida by themselves. Although, if I'm going to stick to my formula of a group of 5 being within 1 game of the Power 5 team that won the national championship, then Boise State would get a national championship. That Louisville team, I believe, lost to UCF. Wisconsin lost to Michigan. So 2006, let's see who Boise State played. Of course, that was the infamous Fiesta Bowl win against Oklahoma. So they beat an 11-2 Oklahoma team that was number 7 in the country and the Big 12 champion. It's pretty impressive. But yeah, I got to make a stipulation that's a little bit more in depth on group of 5 teams because just basically handing them a national championship because they're within 1 game of the Power 5 national champion, I don't think justifies their season. I don't think it's fair to the Power 5 champion. But I will know that Boise State went undefeated and beat the number 7 team in the country. So that's pretty much clear-cut Florida. I thought it was going to be a little more convoluted than that. For some reason, I thought USC was a 1-loss team, but they lost to UCLA as well. I do believe that year. Tim having fun with the Michigan fans. Chris telling us that Louisville lost to Rutgers. Okay, lost to Rutgers. I think it was the Louisville team in 2013, the Louisville team with Teddy Bridgewater. That's what I'm thinking of. The 2013 Louisville team with Teddy Bridgewater that finished with one loss. They lost a 38-35 game, I believe, to UCF. So this team lost to Rutgers. Okay. All right. Yes, you are correct, Matthew. We will have the easiest time in 2005. It could have been difficult. It was close to being difficult, but it was not difficult. What's going on here? Where's 2005? Yes, this is not difficult, although there are some tremendous teams this particular season to give some recognition to. Texas is the national champion. There is no doubt. That's all there is to it. They went undefeated. Nobody else did. They, of course, won the epic matchup with USC. That Penn State team, it should be noted, lost by 1 second. They lost on the final play with 1 second on the clock against Michigan at the Big House. Otherwise, we would have had a controversy of who plays in the BCS championship game, Texas, USC, Penn State. That Ohio State team was tremendous. They lost to Penn State in a whiteout by a touchdown, and they also lost a game that they kind of handed to Texas. But Texas won the game. Of course, Limas Snead with the late touchdown to beat Ohio State that had a touchdown dropped that would have given them a 10 or 11-point lead in the fourth quarter. All right, so that's it. We're done. Texas in 2005. That's easy. 2004, we have a pretty obvious controversy that can't be figured out. We just have to give recognition to Auburn is all we have to do there. We've got a split national championship, basically. Or I don't like to call them split national championships. They were just multiple national champions. So USC crushed Oklahoma 55-19. Give some credit to Utah. They beat Pitt in the Fiesta Bowl. That was an Urban Meyer Utah team with Alex Smith at quarterback. But of course, they did not play the schedule to warrant championship consideration. So USC is the national champion, but Auburn is also a national champion. That is what the deal is in 2004. I think what we're going to do going forward, Tim is telling us Auburn would have gotten smoked. That is completely irrelevant. All right, so, and we don't know that they would have gotten smoked. A lot of us thought, 90% of the nation thought Texas was going to get smoked the next season. They did not. So Tim's opinion, of course, is shocking to all of us that they would have gotten smoked. But Auburn is a co-national champion in 2004. All right. Before I take this call, I'm reminding everyone, talk to me about this particular season that I'm on. Otherwise, you will be cut off immediately. All right. We got Caden on the line. Caden, what's going on?
Good evening, Mark. I was just drinking my peach tea, and I saw you were going live talking about national championship reset between 1998 and 2013.
Yes. So we are currently talking about 2004.
2004. Now, I just heard you state that Auburn is the co-national champion of 2004.
According to me. Yes.
Well, I was going to say, obviously, according to you, since you're the one who's hosting the show. But I was going to say Ohio State should have won the national championship in 2004.
Okay. I'm going to give you one statement to somehow come up with Ohio State winning a national championship in 2004, a season in which they went 8-4.
Well, we should have never lost the 4 games that we did. I don't know what the ridiculous.
I don't have time for this tonight. I don't have time for idiots to get on here. No idiots tonight. I put up with idiots about 360 days a year. There's about 5 times a year I say no idiots. No idiots. No tolerance for morons. Okay, this is one of those nights. All right. Let's move on to 2003. We have an idiot here who wants to claim that a team that went 8-4 should have won a national championship. I see one other name in the chat of somebody who could possibly make those moronic arguments as well. I see another name, initials CF, that could possibly call and argue that a team that was 8-4 is the national champion. But no, no. I've had a tremendous day. I've had a very fun-filled day, had a nice outing today. Yeah, I'm not putting up with idiots. No idiots, no tolerance for idiots tonight. 0. All right. Okay. 2003. Yeah, 2003. And Tim, believe me, if we would go back to 2005, first of all, USC was like a 7 or 8 point favorite, which was not a remarkably high, but that's still a solid favorite. There were all sorts of people picking USC just to trample Texas. But regardless, doesn't really matter. Texas won that game, and we don't know what would have happened between USC and Auburn in 2004. Nobody knows what would have happened. Everybody can have their opinion about a game that was not played. And I will respect anyone's opinion who has an opinion about a game. Let's say USC didn't play Rutgers that year. Yes, I think it's safe to say that USC would have won that game. But USC and Auburn in 2004, I don't know. I have no issue with anyone who's arguing that USC was the better team. I have no issue with that. There's more evidence to USC being the better team, but we don't know who would have won the game. Therefore, Auburn gets a share of the national championship. Or in my opinion, I don't even like that term of shared national championships. There were multiple national champions for the voice of college football. This is just our rundown here that we're going with Auburn and USC in 2004. Okay, 2003, we've got an issue with 2003, of course. And our issue with 2003 where's my share screen? So here we are, 2004. Let's go back to 2003. And this, I believe, is going to be pretty clear cut that we've got 2 national champions. Yes. USC lost, LSU lost. And this is one of those situations where everybody in the world wanted to see these 2 teams play. But Oklahoma had just lost a Big 12 championship game by 4 touchdowns. Now, they still had the same record as USC, granted. They actually played an additional game because they had to play a conference championship game. So there is that. So I'm not faulting Oklahoma. It wasn't their decision. And they did have the same resume as USC, but they kind of clearly showed us by losing by 4 touchdowns at Kansas State. Although it could be argued that they lost to a better team than USC lost to. Who did USC lose to in 2003? Is this another Oregon State loss? When you really look at this and see that USC officially won 1 national, they lost to Cal and Aaron Rodgers. Yeah, overtime. Yeah. So this is USC in 03. Beat Auburn. Beat some other decent teams. Washington State was number 6 in the country, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But there's the loss right there. 3 overtimes to Cal. All right. The LSU loss in 03. Who did they lose to? Auburn, right? 2003 LSU lost to Florida, 19-7. And they beat Georgia, number 7. They beat Auburn, number 17. Beat Alabama by 24. Beat Ole Miss. Close one there. Beat Georgia, Oklahoma, of course, in the BCS championship game. So, this is clear cut. It's clear cut that it's not clear cut. It's clear cut that both of these teams were great and they both earned a national championship. So USC national champion, LSU national champion, and lo and behold, they both did claim and earn a national championship. We got the BCS going to LSU, and of course the AP voted for USC, and that was the rightful thing to do. But man, it would have been so awesome to see these two teams play. And it really doesn't matter what I think. I'm not prepared predicting games. I would have given an edge to USC because LSU was they were a bit limited throwing the football around. So anyway, that's 2003 where we got USC and LSU. (2002). This one's easy. This is kind of like the Texas deal in 05. 2002. Ohio State won the national championship. What can you say? They were undefeated 14-0, the first team to win 14 games. They beat Miami. Case closed. That Georgia team was really good. They beat, they won the Sugar Bowl over, man, I'm blanking, Florida State, right? Yeah. So there you go, 2002, Ohio State. All right. Don't need to spend much time there. I would love to sit and gloat and reminisce, but no reason to. 01, there is a clear national champion, but in terms of who Miami played in the Rose Bowl to win the national championship, well, that's the difficult part here. Dennis, I believe, is referring to a pass interference call. I know exactly what you're talking about. Actually, Miami got more calls in that game. My goodness. If people that actually know the sport and watch the games and remember the games, yeah, there was a lot more to it than that. Had the officials been on top of their game, Miami would have probably never had the ball to drive down the field and tie the game to go into overtime. But we'll review that game someday. We'll put that on the watch party. By the way, we got a watch party coming up Monday night. So join us for the 2024 Rose Bowl. Michigan beat Alabama in overtime. All right, let's go back to 01. And Miami's the national champion. This might be the clearest national champion. When we talk about teams that were clearly the best and there's not a close second, 2020 Alabama comes to mind. Do you have any others in there? I don't think the LSU team in 2019, I think Clemson gave them a good game. It was a 3-point game in the fourth quarter. Who knows what Ohio State would have done had they gotten a shot against LSU. Yeah, I think that other than 2020 Alabama, that this team was by far the best team in the country. And you just had weird circumstances here, and people go crazy about Nebraska making the championship game. But so they lost by 26 points to Colorado on the final day of the season. Therefore, they did not play in the conference championship game. But they only lost one game. So really your candidates, what's funny about this when you really look at this is nobody gave any consideration to Maryland, who was the ACC champion at 10-1. They got whipped by Florida, I believe, in the Orange Bowl. And I think Moose is putting a vote for 2023 Michigan as being by far the best team in the country that year. Not if you watch the Rose Bowl. All right. Anyway, so you got Oregon, and we'll have to see who Oregon lost to. That's the debate: is Oregon, Nebraska. Look at Illinois, 10-1. They won the Big Ten. But what happened to most of these teams, Illinois and Maryland in particular in their bowl games, obviously completely bashed their resumes and their claims. But we're just talking about what it looked like going into the postseason. So let's look up. I don't remember who Oregon lost to in 2001. We will find out. Is this the controversial game with Oklahoma? No, I don't think so. I think that was 2003. 2001 Oregon lost to Stanford 49-42. Okay. 49-42. Okay, so that's the deal with Oregon. And there was no Pac-12 championship game. Now, they were impressive against Colorado, won by 22 points in the Fiesta Bowl. It's a really good team. Joey Harrington at quarterback. And then I'm curious to see Illinois. I know, Moose, you love your 2023 Michigan team, and but they were not dominant to the degree that these other teams were. No. They skated by Ohio State. They skated by Maryland. They skated by Alabama. They played nobody in non-conference play. All right. So anyway, I want to see, Illinois, 2001 Illinois. And this Illinois team, I'm not saying that they should have been a national championship team by any stretch. They got killed by LSU in the Sugar Bowl. They lost to Michigan by 25 points. Did they beat anyone any good? Purdue was number 20. That was post Drew Brees. That was like a Curtis Painter Purdue team. That Ohio State team, that was Jim Tressel's first team. They weren't very good. They were okay. Yeah. Then they got killed by, and the game was not as close as 47-34. They got crushed. Yeah. Just curious if Illinois had any kind of claim. They were the Big Ten champions, and Maryland, let's look at Maryland. (2001) Maryland. They lost to Florida State. I was just going to say, most likely they lost to Florida State by 21 points. There was no ACC championship game, and there they beat a ranked Georgia Tech team in overtime, and Clemson wasn't particularly good then. And then they lost to Florida by 33 points in the Orange Bowl. So, yeah, those teams, there's just nobody that could hang with Miami this particular year. But I do think that Oregon won a conference championship. Why was Oregon not playing Nebraska in the championship game? Oregon won the conference. Nebraska did not win a conference. Oregon should have played in the national championship game. We are certainly not taking anything away from Miami in 01, one of the great teams of all time, but just noting that Oregon could have been selected. Okay. Let's go back to 2000. And I think this is not clear cut, but the debate is clear cut. I don't think anything else is going to come into play than what's in my head between Miami, Florida State, and Washington. So in 2000, Oklahoma, under Bob Stoops, his second team, they were the big surprise that season. They went 7-5 in Stoops' first year. So Oklahoma rode a dominant defense to an undefeated season and a spot in the BCS championship game. But who should they play? Well, the three teams that come to mind are Miami, Florida State, and Washington. But let's also consider that Oregon State was 10-1. Let's look them up. They went on to throttle Notre Dame in the Fiesta Bowl. And that was the year, right? 2000. And then you see Virginia Tech. The deal with Virginia Tech and the reason they're eliminated is because Virginia Tech lost, I think, pretty handily to Miami. I think Miami took care of Virginia Tech pretty easily. So let's look at the deal is that Miami beat Florida State. So Florida State should not have been playing in the national championship game. But Washington beat Miami. I believe Oregon State beat Washington. Let's look it up. Washington lost to Oregon by a touchdown. So Washington lost to Oregon. And Oregon State, they lost to Washington. Okay. Think about this. I love thinking about stuff like this, that Oregon State lost to Washington on the road by a field goal. Look at this Oregon State team in 2000. This was the Chad Johnson, TJ Hushmanzada, and somebody playing defensive end that I can't recall right now. But that Oregon State went to Washington, lost by a field goal. If they win that game, it would have been Oklahoma. We would have had Oregon State. Yeah, Steven Jackson at running back. Good call, Ralph. I'm almost positive. Yeah, because he was with the Rams by like 02, 03. So that should have been a Steven Jackson team. Yes. Yeah, look at the playmakers on that team. That's crazy. They lost by a field goal. I would have loved to have seen. We should do a video sometime talking about all the teams that are just complete also rans in the sport. But if something would have broken just right, they would have played in a national championship game. And this is one of those occurrences. We could have seen Oregon State in the national championship game. That would have been cool. Draft Scout says, I was at the Disney Awards back then. I remember for real 2022, Dan Morgan was won every award. I was at the Piano Bar Boardwalk and he was handing us trophies to hold. That's cool. Yeah. So that knocks out Oregon State. Washington beat Oregon State. And again, Miami beat Florida State. So this to me is a Washington-Miami situation. And of course, the Huskies beat the Canes. So Washington, in my eyes, should have played in the BCS championship game in 2000. That takes us back to 1999. This is an easy one, I believe. I think this is just simply Florida State and Virginia Tech went undefeated. Whoop. Let's see here. $19.99. There it is. Florida State 12-0, Virginia Tech 11-0, or both teams 11-0 going into the game at the Superdome. Florida State won by 17. Virginia Tech had a 1-point lead in the fourth quarter of that game, and then Florida State just exploded and took it away. That's all there is to that season. Those are your two teams. Those are your two teams that particular year. A little gold star for Marshall, 12-0, finished 13-0. That would have been with Byron Leftwich, correct? Or was that Chad Pennington was there in 97? I don't think he would have still been there in 2000. That would have been Leftwich. I think Marshall football had two longtime NFL starting quarterbacks back to back. All right, so that's 99. That's easy. 1998 is not easy. One of the spots is easy. The other one is a nightmare. There we've got 1998. So Tennessee skated by all sorts of games that particular year. They had a pass interference call go their way against Syracuse. They had the infamous Clint Sterner fumble where nobody touched him at midfield. They gave the game to Tennessee. So regardless of how Tennessee made it, they skated by. I was at the SEC championship game in the press box on that fateful day of championship weekend in 1998, if you folks remember it, where Tennessee was number one. And earlier in the day, UCLA had it lined up. Well, if you look at December 7th right there, let's back up to week 13. There are your top 5 teams in the country. So the first one that fell, not in order chronologically because that was a night game, but I'm just talking in terms of rankings. Kansas State went down to Texas A&M in the Big 12 championship game. UCLA lost to Miami in a makeup game. Edgerrin James 38-35. And then Florida State pulled through. Ohio State needed one more loss, and they needed Tennessee to go down. Tennessee was down in the fourth quarter to Mississippi State, Georgia, and I'm going to finish my cool story. Yes, I was covering the SEC championship game up in the press box, and yes, that was quite the night that my videographer was on the field, and I told him exactly at what time to leave the field so we could set up for the news, for the 11 o'clock news, and do our live stream, or whatever we called it. It was a live shot. It was not a live stream. I say live streams all the time now, but it was a live shot. Didn't know what a live stream was then. And I remember running like a madman because my moron videographer, God bless his heart, Chad Ray, if you're out there, yeah, I just called you a moron because I called you a moron that night, I'm sure, because you didn't leave the field. You were too excited about shooting the game. You didn't leave the field when I told you to get outside the stadium to set up the live shot. And so I'm watching from the press box. I'm a million feet away. I'm watching from the press box, and I know what time I have to leave to get down to do our live shot because the game's not going to be over. So I'm having to kind of juggle watching the game, knowing what's going on with doing my live shot for the 11 o'clock news. And this was always the issue in these situations, that you watch like 3/4 of the game and then you got to set up for your live shot, and it takes you forever to go from like the press box down to wherever your live shot's located. And we were outside the stadium. And the other issue was always that your technical people wanted you to set up as soon as possible. Well, if you were talent, you wanted to set up as late as possible because you wanted to watch as much of the game as possible. You didn't want to be down there a half hour before and just stand around and do all these mic checks. But our satellite guy, Mark Blazer, and whoever was running camera, well, it was my guy Chad, they always wanted to be set up early. So anyway, I see my guy Chad, videographer, who I needed for the live shot, still shooting a game on the sideline. So I couldn't go straight down from the press box to the live shot. I had to go run his ass down, that knucklehead who's on the sideline still shooting the game. So I had to run out onto the field and grab him and yank him outside to do the live shot. And I was huffing and puffing. And because I couldn't take the elevators were jammed, packed with people. So I had to run the ramps down the stadium. Yeah, it's quite the night. Anyway, you guys don't care. Tennessee, clear number one, clear undefeated. They're in the BCS championship game, of course. But who should they have played? I can't tell you. I know that Florida State got the nod, but Ohio State was right there, and Kansas State, and Arizona, and UCLA. And what about Wisconsin was 10-1? And our friend Christopher Foote would probably mention Sean King and Tulane at 11-0. So our call on 1998 is simple. Tennessee's the national champion, but Ohio State, Kansas State, Arizona, UCLA, and Wisconsin all had claims for a spot in the BCS championship game. We've done it, folks. Ralph wants to know who was 12-1 and ranked number 13 in the final poll. We had Air Force. There you go. The Falcons of Air Force. Folks, if I could get you to do anything, it would be to shop on Amazon with this link that we provide, because it would help us tremendously hear the voice of college football. Same shopping experience, doesn't cost you a penny. So it's the one way that you can contribute financially to the voice of college football. And I know the first time it's going to be a pain because you're going to forget to do it, and you're going to have to grab the link, and you're going to have to go over here and open this tab and grab the link. But once you grab the link, you got the link. And if you use it when you shop on Amazon, that would help us immensely here at the Voice of College Football. That could be the thing that makes us go. If everyone who is a faithful viewer here at the Voice of College Football on all the channels would use the Amazon link, then I have visions of me signing off like a year from now and saying, if you would have used the Amazon link. All right, folks, appreciate you being here for our rundown of national championship seasons and our national championship reset from 1998 through 2013. So we covered the BCS, and we will continue now with the real fun stuff, because we don't even have a championship game. We don't even have a championship game starting in 1997, going backwards to somewhat sort something out. So it really gets messy, 1997 and before. Ralph reminds us 40 days to college football. And again, the Amazon link in the description section of this video and all the videos. And join us for the College Football Show Monday through Fridays, 4 p.m. Eastern Time. See you next time.